morning. I'm Jamison Euler, anchoring our special coverage from Manatee County outside of the Piney Point evacuation zone tonight. I'm out in the field this evening to provide more context to this major story. For years, community leaders have been trying to figure out what to do about the contaminated water at the old Piney Point phosphate mine right off of US 41 near Port Manatee. And now it seems things are finally coming to a head with more water leaking out of a containment area, triggering evacuations tonight. This map shows the areas under the latest evacuation notices. The notice extends west to US 41 and now covers the neighborhoods 1 mile north of the gypsum stack, which is on the brink of collapse if the latest leak is not stopped. If the gypsum stack can't hold, residents have been told hundreds of millions of gallons of water could spill into Tampa Bay and cause a major environmental disaster. Throughout the next half hour, I'll be digging deeper into how we got to this point, why every plan of action has seemed to not work over the years, and the consequences of that toxic water if it spills into the bay. But first, let's get right to ABC Action News reporter McKenna King. McKenna, you just got out of an update from the county about this quickly evolving situation.
Jamison, that's exactly right. Manatee County officials just met with Senator Jim Boyd and Representative Will Robinson to give residents an update on the situation as it stands this evening. Now, County Administrator Dr. Scott Hope says he believes they've got everything under control. Still, they're trying to empty 700 million gallons of water out of that retention pond, and they're putting it right into Tampa Bay at Port Manatee. Now, County Administrator Hopes says they're actively emptying 22,000 gallons of water every minute into Tampa Bay right at that port. And at this point, he says it will likely take between 10 and 12 days before the pond is completely empty. But as far as when people who live in the evacuation zone can get back into their homes, he says that is a moving target. While it is a small residential area, there are still between 15 and 20 homes with families and animals, all under a mandatory evacuation notice.
Goes into being a little nervous about the future. We live out in the country on 6 acres, and we live on a well. So is this going to get into our well water? How long has it been leaking? Is it safe to bathe my children in it? Wash my dishes in it? You know, how long the long-term effects are going to be? And then we're avid boaters, and we fish, and you don't want to see that being dumped out into your beautiful bay.
The original evacuation zone this afternoon was in the areas to the south of the retention pond, but the sheriff's office noticed another leak later in the day up from their helicopter, and that was affecting the north area of the pond. That's when the county widened the evacuation area to the north as well. County Administrator Hope says the Department of Environmental Protection is on site 24 hours a day monitoring this situation.
If we are only dealing with the current situation, that they should be able to offload a majority of the water in that 177-acre area within 10 to 12 days, and then it would be safe. The other structures are far more stable at the moment. This happens to be the highest one. And it's one that has been perhaps the least stable.
Our top priority is getting through this emerging problem, this instant problem, this emergency that we have today, and we'll get the money. We'll solve the problem. This has been our top legislative delegation priority for at least a year now. And I said this to the press a couple days ago. This quarter-century debate on what to do with this property needs to come to an end.
County Administrator Hope says the majority of the water in the retention pond is silt and salt water from a dredge project in Port Manatee several years ago. He says the water has a pH balance around 5.7 and that it is safe to put back in at the port, but that water is still contaminated. And some good news, DEP is on site and they are actively testing the drinking water in the area to make sure it stays safe for residents. And at this point, we have had no update otherwise. Hope says they're also trying to back up support of the southeast wall of that retention pond to prevent a total collapse of the gypsum stack. He also says that this administration is committed to solving this problem once and for all. Reporting live in Palmetto, McKenna King, ABC Action News.
McKenna, thank you. And anyone who's lived in Manatee for a while knows this is not a new problem. For decades, the contaminated water at Piney Point has plagued the Tampa Bay area. Even 15 years ago, a top state regulator called it one of the biggest environmental threats in Florida history. ABC Action News reporter Wendy Lane has been following the county's struggle to find a solution and takes us deeper into what many have called a ticking time bomb.
When owners abandoned the Piney Point phosphate mine in 2001, they left behind an 800 million gallon problem. These elevated ponds, called gypsum stacks, are full of contaminated water produced as a chemical byproduct of mining. And getting rid of 800 million gallons of toxic water isn't easy, like State Representative Bill Robinson said in December.
We've been trying to solve it for 10, 20 years and nothing has happened.
Because where do you put toxic water? The county, state, and HRK Holding, who currently owns the property, have worked for years in finding a solution.
We need to find a way that is the safest means to handle this contaminated water.
The county decided the best environmental option is to move the water from above ground to a deep water injection well 3,000 feet below. But that idea is still waiting state approval and funding. Now, for decades, the sitting bowls of toxic water have constantly threatened the surrounding community. We did a story back in 2014 on the same issue when nearby farmers were begging the county to step in.
All of us who require this natural resource.
Another fear has been the water leaking or overflowing into Tampa Bay that is right next to it. The contaminated water could cause algae blooms and large fish kills, similar to red tide. And worst case scenario would be the stacks becoming weak and collapsing, flooding the entire area in toxic water. For all of these reasons, Manatee County made finding a solution to drain the toxic water at Piney Point their #1 priority in 2021, before it's too late.
We keep kicking this can down the road, and one of these days it's going to come back and we're going to have a mess.
In Manatee County, Wendy Lane, ABC Action News.
And as of yesterday, at least 25 million gallons of that toxic water containing nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus have been discharged into Tampa Bay. So tonight, I reached out to a geochemistry professor at USF to ask him what environmental impacts we could see from this wastewater dump.
The main impact of this will probably be a large-scale algal bloom that can result in sort of crowding of the water and causing fish to die, which has its own bad effects too. Then the water becomes rather foul-smelling. It can impact other things that eat those fish or elsewhere too. So it has a sort of a food web impact.
And algal blooms are something that we've come to know here all too well in recent years with red tide. We also reached out to Congressman Vern Buchanan's office, who oversees this area of Manatee County, saying in a statement tonight, quote, "This is extremely serious. The state and the county need to work together and resolve this as quickly and safely as possible." There's still a lot of ground to cover with this big story that impacts people through all our communities. So we wanted to know more about the contaminated water that's already gotten into the Bay and which parts of the Bay Area could feel the biggest impact. That part of the story is just minutes away. But for now, I want to send it back over to you, Wendy.
All right, Jameson, thank you. We'll check back with